So, same as the others, could you start out by saying your name and what do you do?
My name's Frances Humes. I am a field manager and coordinator with Field Projects International.
Excellent. So you have a pretty extensive field biology background. So what did you think about getting more into this type of course that did more of the wet lab portion?
Oh, I think it was fantastic. It was great to be back in a lab, but I've always been on the processing side of the samples, and it was great to actually be on the data collecting side of it, the actual results side of it. You know, for years it's just been about seeing how it gets packaged to that point.
And so can you unprocess that a little bit more for people who don't know quite so much about the field research side of things? Mm-hmm. So you go out and you collect samples, and you know, what is that like?
Well, for primates, we go out and we have a process to gently trap the monkeys, and we bring them into a processing tent and we collect all the samples we can. Nothing harmful to the monkeys, that's always our first thought. But you know, we collect fecal samples, we get measurements, we get dental impressions, we take swabs of their mouths, and we take hair and nail samples.
And so what is the purpose of collecting all these different types of samples from primates?
The purpose is just to gather as much data as we can to have a better idea of their life histories and what impacts them, I believe. So we want to collect all the data that we can about them while we can. You know, some of the data we might even, with some of the samples we might be collecting just knowing that one day we'll be glad we have, you know, 10 years of recorded history and samples on these animals so that we can test and see, you know, what kinds of impacts there have been on them. Excellent.
And so the typical process would be to collect these samples and then do what in sort of an ordinary scenario?
We bring them back to camp. Usually we process them to make sure that they are stable for transport back to the U.S. And in some cases that means making sure that they are stable for weights that could be, you know, just someone flying back to the States. Other times it means, you know, it could be months or years that they could be held up in waiting for permits and things like that to come through.
Gotcha. So there can be a significant time delay with a lot of these samples. Mm-hmm. And so what did you think about this idea now trying to perform all of those downstream steps right here and right now for a 2-week course?
Oh, I think it's amazing. It's so exciting to think about all the ways this could be applied to other projects as well. You know, there are some times that the samples degrade in that time or you can't even get the permits in place, and just expanding this to all of the other projects going on across the world, they could be doing this and collecting data as they go and even adjusting their projects, you know, mid-season and collecting better data that way.
And we were in sort of a crowded environment at sometimes. There were a lot of students in the lab. Were there any challenges that you encountered along the way?
Yes, I am used to knowing everything going on in the lab I'm in. You know, I know what that person's working with, I know where that sample is going, I know what supplies we have. It being a little crowded and working with so many people with different backgrounds, it was a little harried at times.